Shop the Sherwin-Williams 4th of July sale and get 30% off paints and stains June 27th through July 7th. With prices starting at $34.29, it's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Whether you're looking to revamp your interior or exterior, we have you covered with bold hues, soothing neutrals, and everything in between. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store or shop the sale online. Delivery available on qualifying orders. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
He retired as a sergeant from the Milwaukee Police Department. Early in his career, during field training, he captured a killer armed with a knife at gunpoint. He's exposed to violence throughout his career. He's here to talk about that. A missing person investigation that turned into a murder. All that and more coming up on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. I know we've all got lots of apps on our phone, but there's one you should check out, the Medium app, medium.com. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast, where you find great articles, blog posts from me on Medium. That's the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Medium app, or you can go directly to medium.com. Reaching out to us from the great state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, don't you know? We have Patrick O'Donnell. He's retired as the Milwaukee Police Department, retired as a sergeant. He is also an author, written or co-written 10 books. He has a website. He has a podcast. You can find all that at copsandwriters.com. That's copsandwriters.com. Patrick, A, thanks for your service. B, thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. And I retired as a sergeant from the Baltimore Police Department, and Baltimore and Milwaukee have a lot in common. I just say it gets pretty cold in Baltimore, but it's not as cold as Milwaukee. You guys, you know how to do cold.
Yeah, we do. And I will say that sergeant was the best job on the department. So you know what I'm talking about.
It was, and here's the reason why. I always say this. It was the hardest job, but every department is run by the sergeants, and you can have the most influence on the men and women that work below you. I see a lot of negative things nowadays, and most of it's blown out of proportion. But when I see really negative things, I'm like, where are the sergeants? Where's the lieutenants? Where are they at? How come they didn't get involved? How did they not know about this? So you could really have a big influence, and you could, this is one thing that a lot of people get misconceptions about, is we demanded the best from our people, but we also took care of them. And we did our best to shield them from unnecessary harassment from the brass.
Yeah, and not in like a nefarious way or a legal way or anything like that when you talk about shielding. Because I say the same thing, and sometimes people get the wrong idea. It's like you had one foot with your troops, and the other foot was, you're a supervisor, and you're deflecting from unnecessary just silliness, to tell you the truth.
Oh, yeah.
That your cops should not have to deal with.
And a couple guys, I'll just give you a couple examples. When I got promoted sergeant, I thought I knew what I was getting into. I didn't, but I really loved it. We had a district commander that would go crazy. He'd be like, did you hear what so-and-so supposedly did? And I'm like, at first I was, what did I do? Oh, my God, this guy's going off the deep end. Then I was like, I'll fire that guy. And I'll read him out. And they're like, easy. Well, it's not that big a deal. So we would do guidance and counseling. We'd do other things. And unfortunately, it came a time where I had to arrest some people and actually cut some people loose and get them fired. But they deserved to go. So the nefarious part, I get what you mean when they say it's the thin blue wall of silence. I never, ever encountered that, ever.
Yeah, neither did I. And yes, unfortunately, I had to arrest some cops.
Yeah.
I had to, do discipline. I mean, it's kind of like you're a super dad. It's like, okay, you put yourself in this position, I'll make it as palatable as possible, but the end result's still going to be in the end result.
Right. And there's a lot of responsibilities. Responsibility of the people and responsibility of the cops that work under you. And we had a huge, at the time, we had up to 13, 14 people we supervised. They've since cut it down, but it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah, it's span of control. When I was on late power, that was 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., I was on that for 4 years. The rest of the time I was either midnight to 8, and then I spent a little time on day shift before I retired. But that was my favorite shift. I had 23 cops, and at least 50% or 51% had to be working. Your workload was a lot higher, it was a lot tougher, but you really bonded with these people, and you got to work with them through thick and thin and hopefully make a difference. Not to be too corny about it, but,
no.
A lot of, hey, Sarge, can I talk to you for a second? And the door closes. Okay, nothing good is going to come out of this.
No.
All right, come on, have a seat,
And there was so much we can go on and on and on about that, but there's some things that, and I talked with a guest recently. He was a command master sergeant in the United States Army, and he said the biggest difference between police work and the military is the officers in the military were never grunts. They don't know what it's like to be a private. They don't know what it's like to be a corporal. The sergeants do. So you know how to handle things. And police work, you do that. Everybody starts off as a patrol officer. That's just there's a laugh and people go, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to the academy. I'm going right from the academy to homicide. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't quite work like that. Let me know how it works.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the way it should be. And there were some that, they had high aspirations, and to put it in a kind way, they hid behind a desk their entire career.
Oh, you're being too kind.
Yeah, it's like, okay, they would pick or get chosen or however it would work for a lot of inside duty while you're not learning the street.
No.
I mean, there was a copper that I worked with that was on late shift with me. We're like in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city, which was just a playground for a new cop. I mean, you couldn't ask for better. And our lieutenant comes out and she's like, hey, Officer X, I'm not going to say who it is. He's like, do you want to be a cop or not? And, the cop looks at her and says, what do you mean, ma'am? And she said, I realize you're new and you have to take your turn working inside. Either you're going to be the jailer, you're going to be front counter, whatever. The work that nobody else wants to do. But you're new, so you got to pay your dues. And she's like, I see you in here every night. You volunteer to be in here. You're not going to learn
right
in here. You're going to learn the job out there. What do you want to be? So what happens? A week later, she gets transferred to the academy, working 11 in the morning till 7 at night in some community, blah, blah, blah. Goes up to internal affairs, and, fast forward
you said it.
later. I did. And I will use the caveat that not everyone in internal affairs is bad.
No, they're not.
It's needed.
Yeah,
and
it is
needed.
very needed.
And my head was on the chopping block, but it's only because one of the gals that I worked with was a lieutenant up there, and I'm like, hey, you don't want me, please. And she, and they didn't want people that absolutely hated that job. So, and I'm like, hey, I understand we need good people up there, and I'm not the right fit. And she honored that, and thank goodness for that. But
we used to have a saying that there is police officers. Well, in Baltimore, it's a different lingo, slang. We had police, we had real police, you had good police, then you had police officers or mobile report takers.
Yeah, mobile
and the mobile report takers are the ones who they never ever got to a hot call. They never got blood on their shirt, and they always got promoted. And they're the ones that were toxic when it came to supervising manpower.
Well, what was funny, I guess I shouldn't say funny, this person, fast forward later, she's a sergeant, and I remember she was at a house fire, and she's calling up her brass that she knew. She was very politically connected. And she's like, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm like laughing. I'm like, this is one of the simplest jobs as a patrol sergeant. Yeah. Hey, see those guys with hoses and trucks and stuff and, that are going to install a pool in somebody's basement? Let them do their thing and we'll do our thing, And later on, she promotes to lieutenant, and she's given she's trying to be a hard, and it's coming across. She just looks like a buffoon, and her people are looking at her like, who are you? You're a clown.
And that's unfortunately the people that want, not all cases, but some of them want it promoting, and they want it being command staff. And they create a really toxic environment. We're talking with Patrick O'Donnell. He's retired sergeant from Milwaukee Police Department. And he's author of multiple books, 10 books. His website is copsandwriters.com. You find his podcast there. You find his books. You find all kinds of information at copsandwriters.com. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. I'm going to take a short break. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back. You know, we used to have an app, and it was a very popular app. And then, guess what? We couldn't hold a candle to our Facebook presence. How many people have the mobile Facebook app already installed on their phone? How many people use it on their computer? Make sure you follow us. Make sure you like us on our Facebook page. Just search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast, and be sure to send us a comment to one of the posts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Return our conversation on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show with Patrick O'Donnell. He's retired sergeant from Milwaukee Police Department in Wisconsin, and he's author of multiple books, 10 books. He's either written or co-written, and his website is copsandwriters.com. That's copsandwriters.com. They also have a podcast there as well. So, Patrick, we talked about being a police sergeant, and it was a great thing. For me, I loved being in Baltimore, and it was a different set of responsibilities from a police sergeant to lieutenant, but it was a vastly different from being a patrol officer. Number one thing I had to do was teach them that I knew what I was doing from experience. And unfortunately, the only way you get that experience is by going through the bad stuff.
Yeah, you're right about that. Absolutely.
And when I was trained as a rookie police, and I always say this, I'm a Neanderthal, I'm probably a little bit older than you, but I was trained by Vietnam combat veterans, and we had a few command staff that were Korean War veterans, and they did not play. They did not play with officer safety. They did not play with respect when it came to respecting people. They were hardcore, serious, but they were good police.
Well, I'll tell you what, my first captain was a Vietnam vet. He was a Marine. And every morning, I mean, of course, his uniform was immaculate every day. Yeah, he was tough as nails and extremely fair. You know, he walked around all day with a Marine Corps coffee mug and a cigarette, you know, in his hand. And I'll never forget the first day we get in from the academy, you go to your district stations where you're going to be assigned. I don't know Milwaukee. I never lived here. I'm from Chicago, so I recognize a quote-unquote bad neighborhood, and it was right smack dab in the middle of. Half the houses on the block were boarded up or missing or, you know, whatever. And, you know, he walks into the conference room, and, of course, we all snap to attention. We're just out of the academy, literally. And he's like, sit down. And he looks at us. I don't know if I can swear or not on this show.
Oh, radio rules applies. FCC, we just don't swear.
Okay, so he's like, what do you think is going to your careers? So everyone's looking at each other like, I don't know, filling out the wrong report, doing this, doing that. He says, you're all wrong. He looked at us and he said, booze and broads.
That's right.
You know, this is and we're like, what? And he's like, what you do when you're working, as long as your heart's in the right place, we got you. You're going to make mistakes. You're brand new. You don't know anything, but we got you. We will help you. But I can't help you when you're off duty.
No.
He says, I've seen more good cops go down the tubes. Their career is completely torpedoed because of what they're doing off duty. Usually involves romance and or alcohol.
Yeah. Look, I have so many guys that we used to jokingly say that would come to Baltimore, and we had a lot of people from other parts of the United States. And I use Ohio. We had a lot of Ohio cops that came to Baltimore, and when they came, is brand new out of the academy, they were like choir boys. They were the best of the best, sharp, squared away, happily married, 3 kids, going to church every Sunday, you name it. And then in 3 years, they're drinking every night till they pass out. They're living with a stripper in the basement of some house. and they're losing it on calls of people, and you're like, man. And back then, they'd turn a blind eye. I don't say they'd turn a blind eye to it, but they would can you. They'd fire you, or they'd take you off the street.
Yep.
They'd do whatever they could so you wouldn't be an issue. But solving the problem, they didn't do.
Right. Well, what I would say is, like, this captain, his name was Tony Bassich. Unfortunately, he's passed on since. He was also extremely fair and extremely intelligent. He was the perfect captain. the public loved him because he shot from the hip. I mean, he told them the way it was, and he actually did care about them. But the great thing about this captain was that, and most captains at their districts, they ran those districts. Whereas, like, okay, I'm screwing up, I did this wrong or did that wrong, he would handle it at the district level.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm getting too many use of forces with you. You know, they're kind of borderline. Guess what? You're now the booker for 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, you're off the street. And then if you just step over the line and, like, I'm sorry, up to internal affairs, this file goes.
Yeah.
You know, but he had that ultimate control, and he was very wise with it, and he was very fair with it. So you can't ask for anything better.
One of the things, and you bring back so many memories of when I came out of the academy, and our field training was different back then than a lot of field training that a lot of police departments do nowadays. We have about 6 months academy. During the academy, you had field training. You passed, failed. If you passed and you did your grades good, you would get graduated. If you didn't, you get recycled. Was that the case with you guys?
For the most part, yes. I mean, they would do anything possible to make sure that you kept going through and, you know, were successful with your field training. And we had, you know, with anything, we had really good FTOs and we had some really ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. And I was very lucky that my first FTO was from the neighborhood. He was a cop for about 6 years, somewhere in that ballpark. You know, I was working midnight to 8, and it was the worst area of the city, and that's where he grew up. So, I mean, this guy had a PhD in street, level policing. Yeah, and so I was extremely lucky to have Reggie as my FTO.
And they start to see, this is a thing that a lot of people don't get either. And I'm going to flash back and go to your story. They say, our police need more training. I'm like, we had 6 months in the academy. We had daily roll call. We had in-service training once a year, where we go for a week of 4 days of classroom, then 1 day at the range. So tell me, what else is it? What training? Maybe you need some training. Maybe they need to learn how to rehabilitate.
Well, part of the problem is it isn't just more training, but just better quality training.
Oh, yeah.
With better quality instructors. You know, I was in the academy for 6 months, and they could have easily chopped off like 4 weeks of it.
Yeah.
You know, we're done with everything, and we were guest speakered to death or PowerPointed to death with just nonsense.
Yeah, that's unfortunate what it was.
Yeah, and, as far as in-service goes, instead of, like, okay, our SWAT team is called the Tactical Enforcement Unit, we would get, like, a couple hours with those guys doing stairwell clearing, room clearing, all this just really, really good training, hands-on stuff. And it devolved into, well, we're not going to give you that anymore. The latest, like, PC thing or whatever, we're going to PowerPoint you to death with this.
Oh, yeah.
And, and especially the poor late shift cops trying to keep their eyeballs open during this. Are you kidding me? It's during the day, depending who the instructor is, if the heat's on, you're in this warm classroom.
Right.
Your sleep cycle is completely screwed up. And you're supposed to learn something. You're not learning anything.
No. And so much of what we did back then was about satisfying state requirements. And it's really pushing papers, really what it was. And the real education for me came on the street. And I'm sure that was the same for you.
Absolutely. You would learn from the good cops, and then, like, the subpar cops or bosses, you're like, God, I don't want to be like that.
That's exactly right.
So that's, that was how you learn all day long.
We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Patrick O'Donnell. He retired from the Milwaukee Police Department as a sergeant. He's written or co-written 10 books, and his website is copsandwriters.com. You'll find a podcast there as well. That's copsandwriters.com. When we return, we're going to talk about some incidents of violence that he went through during his police career. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Remember when free meant free? No charge, no credit card information needed. Well, a place like that still exists on the internet. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show website, letradio.com. Where everything is free, including the podcast, episodes are available after airing on radio. The website is letradio.com. That's letradio.com. where free means free.
Return to conversation with Patrick O'Donnell on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Patrick's retired sergeant from the Milwaukee Police Department. He's also author or co-author of at least 10 books. And he has a website called copsandwriters.com. That's copsandwriters.com, where you'll also find a podcast. Patrick, thanks for coming on the show. We'll talk about the podcast, the books a little bit later on. Right now, I want to get in policing, and there's a lot of misconceptions about it. And number one thing that I hear all the time in the news is, and on social media, and you don't hear it on my Facebook page, the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. You won't hear it. You won't hear it on my LinkedIn. It's de-escalation. De-escalation is something we did a long time ago, and it's a strategy that both people need to work on. If one wants to de-escalate, meaning the police, and the bad guy doesn't, guess what? It's not going to end well. I don't care how many classes you get. Would you say that's true for you?
Oh, 100%. And like what really is spot on what you just said was cops have been doing this forever. You know, you're a new cop, you're full of, vinegar, you're ready to rock and roll, or at least you should be. And maybe your verbal skills aren't so great. And you get into a tussle, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Jackie Chan, Chuck Norris, or whoever. You're going to get hurt. Whenever you're tussling with someone, you get into a fight, like an hour or two later, you're like, oh, I didn't have that before. That hurts. Or you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh, okay, that's... After a couple of those, you're like, all right, I'd much rather talk to a person than fight with them. That's right. So you all know, everybody that's listening to this that's a cop, and you as well, obviously, you knew the cops that could talk to anybody. And they're masters of de-escalation. We didn't even use the word de-escalation. But you had other cops that could make, Gandhi a fighter, or Mother Teresa person.
We hate to see them come on the scene. Like, everything's nice and calm, and all of a sudden they get the stuff turned up.
Yeah, they throw the hand grenade in the middle of the pile. You're like, what did you just do? Yeah. Shut up. Oh, my God.
And here's another big misconception is that police automatically fire. And I'll very, very quickly, I was in 4 shootings in 10 years. The first 2, I never fired a shot back. The second 2 were long, drawn-out affairs, totally different situations. The last one ended my career. But there was many close calls with guns and other things where we didn't shoot. You had that happen early on in your career in field training with someone armed with a knife. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, you're 100% correct. What happened was I'm a couple days into field training, like literally. Okay, so you have 6 months in the academy. Then they throw you out in the street for 6 weeks with an FTO, and then on like whatever shift, and then you do another 6 weeks with a different FTO on a different shift. So my first one was midnight to 8. It was late shift. I'm a 3 days into training, and I'm working midnight to 8. We're on the wagon, the patrol wagon, and 7 o'clock in the morning, the dispatcher is like, hate to do this to you guys. I was like, okay, this isn't going to be good when they
when they have a little set up ahead of time, it's going to be a bad one. It's usually a DOA.
Yeah, so he's like, hey, start heading to the stabbing. I'll try to get more cars for you. There was like 2 shootings that night, so everybody was tied up. So we were like the last resort, and it's like, sure. Caller states that, the subject just stabbed his best friend. I was like, okay. So we're heading there, and of course, you cut the lights and the siren way before you get there, and here comes dude with the butcher knife in his hand. So my FTO slams on the brakes, and this guy was in shock so much, he kept running towards us. So I jump out, I'm in the passenger side, and he's running literally right at me with the butcher knife, with his hand in the air with a butcher knife. So I draw down, I start giving commands, and my finger is going from off and outside the trigger guard to squeezing. And just in a split second, I think this guy just noticed or saw that I was probably more scared than he was. But I was gonna send him home to Jesus or whatever deity he worshipped or whatever. I'm not gonna get stabbed. So he stops. I put my finger off and outside, and I start giving him commands. He kisses the concrete. My FTO hooks him up. He's literally covered in blood, and he's got the murder weapon in his hand. So my FTO hooks this dude up, put him in the wagon, and he looks at me and says, usually it doesn't work that way. Usually they're running the opposite direction when they show up.
They don't usually run towards the police.
Yes. He said, this is weird, dude. And I'm like, all right. So we head to the scene, and by now the fire department is there working on the victim. Our boss shows up, a couple more cars show up, and I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV, but when there's an IV in each arm and they got his feet elevated way up and they're pumping the fluid from the bag into the guy, it's like, okay, this don't look good. So, somebody's got to ride to the hospital with him. So my FTO is like, hop in the med unit.
In case the person makes a dying declaration.
Yes. He said, get a dying declaration. I'm like, okay. So I'm in there, and remember, I'm fresh out of the academy, and I'm like, okay, I do remember we talked about this.
Yeah. What do I do?
This is not classroom anymore. Yes. I'm like, oh, shoot. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, who killed you? Who killed you? And this guy's just like gurgling, and the paramedics are looking at me like, hey, you want to cut us a little slack here? We're trying to save him. And I'm like, you're going to die. Who killed you? Yeah. And so we get to the hospital, and this is my first time in the trauma room. It's a level 1 trauma center. If the president got shot, that's where he would go. It's just amazing. It's like
Please don't tell me Patrick Day cracked his chest wide open.
Yes, they did.
Well, we're not going into details because I get skeeved out. I went through way too many of those.
So what happened? I'll try to make it as palatable as possible. So, what happens is, they strip you down naked, they're working on you, and I don't know how many doctors, techs, nurses, et cetera, and there's one doctor that's kind of like the band conductor. He's the one that's, the boss. And I kind of pull him off to the side, and I'm like, hey, Doc, is this guy going to make it? He said, if it was you or I, we'd be dead right now. Yeah. This guy's going to live to be 100. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe this isn't a homicide. And as soon as he says that, the EKG thing goes straight. Yep. And he's like, so
I was wrong.
They pump him. So they pump him full of adrenaline. They start doing CPR on him. They bring him back. This happens 3 times. So the third time when he crashes, doctor grabs a scalpel, cracks the chest open, starts doing open heart massage. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm literally like 10, 12 feet away.
Right.
I've never seen anything like this before. And I'm like, oh, my God.
That stuff will stay with you.
On him.
We didn't make it to the morgue in the academy because of scheduling problems, whatever it might be. But I still remember the emergency. And by the way, if you know someone that passes in her sleep, they're lucky. Because if you go to an emergency room, it's going to be ugly, and the humanity is out the window.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. So he starts doing open heart massage on this guy. They worked on him for over an hour. And they finally call. It's just like on TV. It's like, what time is it? Call it. And they all kind of walk away dejected. And so I'm here with this body, and I'm not really sure what to do.
That's what I was going to ask you. My first homicide, I was like, what do I do? I know what I'm supposed to do, but I didn't know the human part of it. I didn't get. They didn't talk about that in the academy.
No, and I don't think there's a way to train you on that. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and I'm seeing these like battle-hardened, tough doctors, nurses, and they all had the same look on their faces. I mean, they don't know this guy, but they tried so hard to save him.
One of the things that I say all the time is that I lied to a lot of people as a police officer, and it's usually when they were taking their last breaths. And I would say, the ambulance on the way, you're going to make it, you're going to be fine. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're talking with Patrick O'Donnell. He's retired from Milwaukee Police Department, retired sergeant. He's written or co-written 10 books, and his website is copsandriders.com. When we return, we're going to talk more about dealing with this violence. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can get started for free. letpops.com. Check it out today. Return conversation with Patrick O'Donnell on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Patrick is retired sergeant from the Milwaukee Police Department, Sergeant's Rule. And we talk about investigating a stabbing that led to a fatality, that led to a homicide early in his career. He's still in field training. He's written 10 books. His website is copsandwriters.com. That's copsandwriters.com. And you also find a podcast there as well. One of the things, Patrick, that we got to reframe it, this guy died, and we didn't know the guy. I got to go through procedures of what I got to do, protect evidence, protect the crime scene. At that point, his body's a crime scene. All those things, right. Make the proper notifications, all those stuff. And when the detectives get there, you kind of take a back seat. I get all that. When you're 21, 22, like I was, and you're dealing with that, it's a heavy responsibility. But when these people passed, when they died, and they died horrible, violent deaths, I could not help but somehow be affected. And part of it is, and it doesn't make sense that people are not police, I had a very dark gallows sense of humor that helped me deal with that. But sometimes...
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, sometimes they come up my head. I'll give you an example. I'm sure you went through this. We get the call for the stinker. Someone's been dead for a long period of time, and when you're brand new at the academy, you get called there. You got to learn how to deal with it. When I was a sergeant, I called all the rookies to come deal with these things. And the first thing the old timers would tell you is, I don't care, Vicks Vapor Rub, burning coffee grinds, smoking cigars, but you can't get rid of that smell. You're not going to cover it up. But the one thing they would say is, don't touch the body. And there's always some kid that did.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But, getting back to what happened at the hospital, we get done with what we ever have to do. The ME, the investigator from the ME came, homicide detectives, blah, blah, blah. I'm walking out with my partner, and there was two nurses that were, trying to save this guy. They're both drinking coffee out of the white styrofoam cups, smoking cigarettes in the ambulance bay, and they were both crying. Now, these are tough, tough cookies. And I can still see their faces to this day. That's how much they cared.
And we don't see all the trials and errors and frustration and futility they felt before that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that was life-changing for me. It's like, okay, but that set the tone, and I'm glad it happened to me early, and I'm glad I got my baptism in fire.
With this guy that you arrested at gunpoint, did you, and I quite often would have a conversation with the guy afterwards and let him know how close he came. Did you feel compelled to do that?
No, I never saw him again. He was handed off because we went to the hospital. There were so many working, pieces to this. My partner already took him to the city jail, my FTO, and I waited at the hospital until he came and picked me up.
So you had no idea. So what I'm getting at is the question is that, again, Hollywood paints a picture that is not accurate. But these situations, even though this guy just killed someone, and I could relate to a lot of that, there was no violence on my part. There's no animosity. I just got a job to do. Was that fair for you?
I was more angry than anything else through the years because I've been in this position many, many times. I've had bullets whiz by my head twice within a foot, but I couldn't shoot back because I didn't have a target.
Right.
That's another story for another day. But, I would be in situations where I could have shot the person, but I didn't for whatever the reason is. And I would be so angry. I'm like, do you realize what position you put me in?
Yeah.
I'm like, do you have any clue, how close you came to either going up or down or somewhere in the middle? You just wouldn't be here. And it never registered with them. It drove me nuts. And it took me a long time to figure that out, that, it's like, you know what? You're going home at the end of the day, hopefully in one piece. And that's all that mattered. And you didn't have to kill someone.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I would get angry too, and one of the things that, and the best way I can describe it is, I would get angry and saying, "You don't even know me, and you're trying to kill me." And I had never wrapped my head around that totally.
Well, yes, and I mean one of the many like near fatal encounters. I'm wrestling with a guy that was out on parole for armed robbery, and I didn't realize at the time I'm an FTO. I've got a recruit, and he's trying to take my gun. He's a lot bigger than me, and this is all just stemming from a boy-girl trouble at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're just having an argument about whatever. I didn't know that this guy had a warrant out that he had a parole violation, and he was going back to prison.
Right.
So the only thing standing between prison was me and my recruit. And, before I know it, he's trying to tackle me. He's a lot larger than me, and his hand is on my gun. So, I did what I had to do, and my recruit actually did very well considering his time on the street, et cetera. And when it was all done and over with, he was going to the hospital because I knocked his head. If I could get my gun out, I would have, but I didn't. I kept it in the holster because I thought he was going to shoot me with it.
Right. That's not a good situation to be in.
No, and when everything was done and over with, he said, yeah, I was going to take your gun, kill you and your partner, and get the heck out of Dodge.
Right. And look, we had some of those as well. And here's what I tell people, and I've gotten the point now, and I've been this way for many years. When people make idle threats, I laugh at them. Oh, you had a death threat. You're United States Senator, you had a death threat. Big deal. We've had plenty of them. Until you are a murderer who's out on parole or a hitman that says, I want to dance and is on a fire escape and you're the only thing between them and freedom, I really don't care what you got to say. It's when the fists are flying that stuff gets real. So I'm always prepared for that. And I always tell people this mindset. I'm not the one. I'm not the one. And from day one of the academy, they taught us never quit. I'm not quitting. I don't care how bad it is.
People boo-hoo the warrior mindset. Now, you can't walk around like a Spartan, ready for action, 24/7. There's times where you have to put on your social worker hat. There's times that you wear a lot of hats. But there are times where you have to be a warrior. Who else is going to do that job?
That's exactly right.
So that's I hate that, they got this warrior. Yes, they have to have it. It's called self-preservation, and it also saves lives.
That's right.
It saves civilian lives. So, you can't be pigeonholed into one little thing like that. You have to be well-rounded. But I tell you what, after I was done with that, I was shaking like a leaf, and I was just angry. I was so mad. And I'm like, this could have went really, really bad.
And things go south in a heartbeat. That's the problem. I want to shift gears because we're running out of time. I want to talk about your books. How many books have you written or co-written?
I have written or co-written 10 books. It started with, before I was a cop, I didn't get on until I was 30. I was on the waiting list for 4 years. I got on in 95. And back then, competition was fierce. Like 4,000 people would show up for a written exam for 200 or 300 spots.
Right.
And, that's just the way it was. So I graduated from college with a degree in sociology that qualified me to sell cars, be a restaurant manager, be a bartender. That's just the way it is. I get the job as a cop. Then what happens is people were asking me to help them buy cars because I sold cars for 4 years.
Same here. After retiring from police work.
So to fast forward, what happened was, it's like somebody approached me and said, you should write a book about that, how to buy a car without being taken for a ride, that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay.
Is that what started the whole thing for you? Because, look,
yes.
I thought when I retired, I'd write the Great American Novel or open an Irish tavern, and neither one were in my wheelhouse.
I love it. I'm bartending at an Irish tavern right now.
Oh.
But anyways.
Look, I could talk all day long. And your website, copsandriders.com. Very briefly, can people get more details about you, your books, your podcast, all that there?
Absolutely, yes. It's geared towards writers who want to get their police facts straight. I have done, I've worked on television shows. I have consulted with numerous, New York Times best-selling authors. I have been on British TV. I've been on American TV, over on Tubi TV, doing true crime stuff. And it's all because of the podcast and the books, and it all kind of melded together.
And you can find the details at copsandriders.com. That's copsandriders.com. Patrick, thanks for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the show. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.